Welcome to another day. It's IB Nation Sports Talk. He's Vince D'Addario. I'm Sean Stiers. Staying warm out there, Vince?
I'm very warm because I haven't left the house since I got home at 3 a.m. this morning. So
Nice.
yeah,
Man.
it was a rough, long day yesterday. Let's just put it that way.
So you started in Panama City.
Correct.
Where did you fly in and out of?
So there's a very small airport just north of Panama City Beach.
Okay.
So we flew out of there. Originally, we were supposed to go to Nashville. All those flights were canceled. So we got pushed to the next day. We flew in the complete wrong direction to Dallas, to Love Field, which I guess is a smaller airport in the Dallas area.
Right.
And you can tell I'm not a world traveler by any stretch. I had no idea there was more than one airport over there. So we go there. The first flight was delayed about an hour and a half. Then we had a 4-hour layover anyway in Dallas, so no big deal. Well, that flight got delayed another hour and a half. So we were supposed to leave at 7:30 Central Time and from Dallas, right? But our original flight was supposed to leave at 1:50 from Panama City, then 7:30, but that didn't leave until almost 9 o'clock Central Time to Midway. Then, of course, we had to go find the car and drive home. So, yeah, we landed.
Finding the car has got to be fun too when it's like 0 degrees
I was
outside.
so nervous it wasn't going to start. I'll be real honest with you, because we dropped it off on Thursday when it was still, in the 30s, normal, whatever. And it was, we know what it's been around here in the negatives. It was -7, I think, when we landed. And it started, baby. My old car, she started right on up. Of course, there was no traffic at 1 o'clock in the morning. So no problems there.
Flew on home. Yeah.
Got home right at the stroke of 3. So, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
What a day.
It was a long day, my friend. But it was good. Like, we sat in like a hotel bar, which apparently in Texas you can do with a 16-year-old. And
who knew?
Watch football, the entire football game that was on. The guy didn't care that we were just hanging out. So that worked out pretty well. So nice. I was like, "Are you sure he can be in?" He's like, "I don't care." All right. Welcome to Texas.
All right, then. In Texas, they've got those, or at least they used to. I think they still have them. They're like drive-up liquor store kind of things. I mean,
really?
You were it's like you literally, it's like going to McDonald's or something. You pull up and get your 12-pack to go.
That's awesome. I've never been to the state of Texas. Now, granted, I was only in the airport, but never been to Texas before. So I guess that's my one trip to Texas, has been in the airport for 4 hours or whatever it was.
I've never been to Love Field. I've seen the signs down there a couple times when I've been down there. I've been to I can't remember what the name of the airport actually is, but the bigger airport in Dallas.
It's smaller, obviously. There's 20 gates. There was only one concourse, 20 gates kind of a deal. But they had restaurants and stuff. So, it was bigger than I had anticipated when I was worried about a 4-hour delay and what the heck we were going to do. You know what I mean? But it was quite the journey. It was quite the journey.
Yeah, Tommy, that I know of, at least in northern Indiana, no drive-throughs up here.
There is one drive. There's one drive-through that I am aware of, but it is technically in Michigan.
Okay.
On the state line.
There you go.
That we may or may not have frequented when I was a younger chap, my college days.
All right. I didn't even know about that one, but yeah. Okay.
So, it's a hole in the wall
Michigan.
Joint. You know what I mean? It's not like yeah, but it's not in Indiana.
All right. Well, we're going to talk a little Notre Dame football today. We're going to gauge the success of the season that just was, the 2023 Notre Dame football season, as in just how successful was Marcus Freeman's second season. Yeah. So I'll just throw it right to you, Vince D'Addario. Do you consider the 2023 Notre Dame football season a success?
This is a harder question than I had anticipated that it would be. To be
because when you sit back, I came up, like with these bullet points, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to address?
Right. So because you could sit when you dissect it, when you sit down and you dissect it, and you break it up into all the little pieces and parts, right? you can find successes. You can find
Mhm.
positives. There's no doubt. There's a bunch of them. There is a bunch of them. But I think, if I'm being honest, I was disappointed overall. I was. And so if I'm disappointed from Vince D'Addario's perspective, I do not think that it was a success. I think there are some successes weaved in, but as an
Right.
overall, when you add it all together, I don't think that it was. And I hate to say it that way. I sound like a bitter fan, but I had higher expectations for this season, and they were in the basement of where the floor was, of where I anticipated the floor should be this
In the
season.
basement of where the floor was.
Yeah, like the floor
Okay.
is like
That's
the
interesting.
ground level. They
Uh-huh.
they kind of ended up in the basement. Now,
Was it a finished basement? Unfinished basement?
it was
Like
a
where?
finished basement. It was a bit
Okay.
of a man cave, but we're still below ground, which is not good. There's plenty of teams out there that would have killed for the success that Notre Dame had. But I think at Notre Dame, the bar's a little bit higher.
Yeah.
I do. So maybe I'm being negative.
No, I
But
was wondering if I was going to be the negative one because I can't, because you're right. And I'm not trying to paint it like this was a horrible season,
right.
anything like that, because there were good things, obviously, that happened
Absolutely.
within it. If you look at the final numbers, like if all you did was look at the final numbers, offense and defense, but you didn't look at the final record, which is what matters the most, right? Not
Yes.
just statistics, but the final record, the wins and the losses. If you look at, if you don't look at the final record and all you did was look at the stats, you'd go, "Oh, it was a great season." Look at all these great things that they did. And again, not trying to paint it as a complete negative, but I can't consider it completely successful. It
Right.
ended on a positive note with a bowl win. Okay, that's nice, but two teams with a bunch of opt-outs, so you basically you're playing a lot of
It's whose
depth
depth is
chart
better.
type
Yeah.
guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was a good season, but they were only one win better than Marcus Freeman's first season as well. And for me, I think that they had to at least get to a New Year's Six bowl for it to be a true success.
Agreed.
Like if they had beaten Louisville, they likely would have done that. They likely would have at least been in a New Year's
Sure.
Six bowl. And with what they had at quarterback, what their defense was, all that, like I would probably rate it 7.5, pushing an 8 out of 10. If I was going to go scale of 1 to 10, what I've thought of the entire season, it was like C plus B range. But again, if I have to look at the final result. We can't just
Right.
go
Exactly.
stats. Got to look at wins and losses are ultimately what count at the end of the day. So when I look at that, where they ended up, that's kind of what I came to. It was a good season,
Right.
but I can't call it an overall success because it fell short of at least getting to the New Year's Six bowl.
Absolutely correct. And that is why I think at the end of the day, the overall record is what makes it a success or not a success. The manner in which you get there is important. The journey is important, and we can pick out positives throughout the journey. We can also pick out a lot of negatives throughout the journey as well when it comes to in-game coaching, when it comes to having to replace a position coach that was supposedly tearing down the foundation of Notre Dame football from the inside out. But you have to take all of that together, and what happened, wins and losses. Notre Dame was on the outside looking in. They were in the Sun Bowl. They were in El Paso. That is not the destination that you or me or
Right.
anybody else anticipated going into this season.
I mean,
Period.
they made lemonade out of lemons in the end when they went to the Sun Bowl. They
Sure,
turned it
absolutely.
into, and again, we've commended Marcus Freeman for, putting the right spin on it and getting the players focused in the right, frame of mind and all that different stuff. But the Sun Bowl's not where anyone was
No,
looking for at the start of the season.
not at all. And we talk about New Year's Six and we talk about those kinds of expectations and things like that. Well, now moving forward from here on out, 24 and beyond, New Year's Six equals playoff. Like now we're having a completely, different discussion moving forward. I know we're going to talk about next year in a minute, but this year, from a record standpoint, from an end of game standpoint or end of season standpoint, it was not a success, in my opinion.
I concur. And now we're going to dig a little bit deeper and kind of look at sort of where it was successful, where, where it fell the most short. I like this comment from DK. I wouldn't have thought Snapchat for DK, but he says, if I walk over to talk to the hottest girl in the room, that's a success. But if I don't get her Snapchat, it's a failure. How old are you, DK? I didn't realize
So
Snapchat
yeah,
was like
seriously.
your thing.
I have Snapchat, but only because I have to use it for school,
I
basically.
don't have Snapchat. Now, what do you do? Do you like stalk students with your Snapchat? Like, how does that work, Dean?
Yeah, for the most part, I may or may not have an alias on there. That kind of a deal. You gotta make it happen. I'm a pretty popular guy, but people don't even know who I am. It's awesome.
So where do you think they did meet the expectations?
Well, I think
what we thought coming into this season.
I think defensively they met the expectations, if not, succeeded or overachieved to a degree. I mean, the defense took one heck of a step forward. People were calling for Al Golden's job. They were calling for Al Washington's job. I mean, we've talked about this for a while, but I think if we're going to talk about where they hit the mark, where they should have been, and if not past that mark, it's got to be the defensive side of the football. I mean, and that's big picture talking. That's the whole unit. We can break it down specifically, but I think, you could go individual players. You could there's a lot of different ways you could go, but I think defensively overall,
oh, for sure,
they bypassed where we thought they would be.
Well, I broke it like, where did they meet expectations? Where did they overachieve? Where did they underachieve? And so, like, again, I think if I look at like what we expected coming in, I definitely put the defense in the overachieve category. Not because there were so many questions about the defense coming into the season based on last year. And then when you look at where they ended up being, like, again, like they didn't just get to, whatever expectation level, they surpassed it, pretty big time. When you look, number 8 in defensive touchdowns, number 29 third down defense, number 3 pass yards allowed, number 2 red zone defense, number 26 rush defense, number 7 scoring defense, number 1 pass efficiency defense, number 5 total defense, number 12 in turnovers gained. And I mean, like, remember, like a couple of the biggest issues they had last year, red zone defense, turnovers gained, like those were 2 major issues. So again, to me, like, they didn't just go to the bar, they far exceeded it. So that's what, like, I put the defense in the overachieve category. And that's like fair. If you're good, like if you're going to look at player specific, I put Xavier Watts, like
overachieve.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I've always been a huge Xavier Watts fan. Like, I have always been in his corner, and I've always been excited about what he would be able to do if they just put him in a position and let him learn that position and be successful at that position, right? And he finally had multiple years at one position, and he's an All-American. Like, I thought that he would be a very integral part of the defense, right? I thought that he would be a very valuable piece of the defense. I didn't think he would garner All-American status. Right. So that's an overachievement. There's anybody that sits here and tells you that he was going to be an All-American and that they knew that was going to happen is lying to your face. I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. Even Brian is one of the biggest Xavier Watts supporters out there. But even him, and I haven't asked him this question, and I should do that sometime. Even him, I cannot imagine he was like, yeah, I knew Xavier Watts is going to be an All-American this year. There's no way. Yeah. There's no way.
I cannot see anyone who, and I haven't seen anyone who is predicting Xavier Watts for All-American at the start of the season. Like, I think there are probably 4 players who would have fit that. Benjamin Morrison is who we would have been talking about on defense. I don't think anyone else would have been predicting an All-American, anyone else to be All-American on defense. Sure. And then Joe Alt, Audric Estime, Sam Hartman. Absolutely. Maybe borderline Sam or Blake Fisher. Other than that, outside of those players, I don't think anyone was predicting any Notre Dame player, to kind of be, and we can go back and look at the preseason All-American stuff. I think maybe Zeke Correll was getting a little bit of love, from some of the, different organizations and stuff like that. But that was pretty much it. Again,
Yeah.
specific to the defensive side, I don't think Cam Hart was really being thought of.
Should have been, but he
in
wasn't.
that.
But he
Yeah, I
wasn't.
mean, he ended up, like you talk about maybe someone who overachieved based on expectation coming into the season. I think Hart probably fits that range as well. But I think that, again, with the way the defense performed overall, I think you had a lot of guys on that side of the ball who really, Howard Cross being one of them, who really, Javonte Jean-Baptiste,
Sure,
who all kind of outperformed what we thought maybe they were. They were like, we thought that they could be good, but they took it to another level, I think.
I mean, the fact that Xavier Watts ended up being the best defensive player in the country, number one, unanimous All-American, number two, and the first safety at Notre Dame to be a unanimous All-American. I mean, it's not elite company. He's by himself. Like that is absolutely amazing to me on so many levels.
I completely agree. And I think that, again, like where they probably met the expectation was they eliminated the bad losses like Marshall and Stanford last year. And I still don't know how to deal with Louisville because, like when you look at Louisville, they had some good defensive metrics and all that, but like should Plummer have had, performed that much better in that game than Sam Hartman?
Right.
Absolutely not.
No. Well, and Louisville is an enigma all by itself. I mean, you got a first-year head coach who's undeniably a good coach. I mean, I think we all can agree on that. I think Jeff Brom's a really good coach.
Sure.
I think that if, again, 10 times out of 10, before this game is played, if you tell me what the quarterback matchup is going to be, Notre Dame wins that matchup every time in my brain. Like that, when we were predicting that game, it's like, well, Plummer's the quarterback for Louisville, so there's no way they're going to win. Like that was my whole thought process going into that game. Now, Louisville, I think, surprised a lot of people with the season that they ended up having. It wasn't just what happened against Notre Dame. I mean, they ended up in the ACC championship, for goodness sakes. I mean, they outperformed them. So you want to talk about overachieving? Louisville overachieved all year long, and the pinnacle of that overachievement was the win against Notre Dame. No doubt about it. Now, does that mean that should have happened? Absolutely not. That should not have happened. Notre Dame was the better team in all facets. There's no doubt. But they were still in a fog after Ohio State and Duke, and they just laid an absolute egg from start to finish. They didn't deserve to win that game.
Okay, so a couple of different ways to go here. Sloppy Joe says, if Notre Dame had beaten Ohio State, does the Louisville loss happen? I mean, the other way to look at it is if they beat Ohio State, does the Duke win happen? Or do they go out and lay an egg, the next week? Does that go completely the other way? Because they definitely looked flat for the majority of that Duke game before Sam Hartman and Audric Estime bailed them out at the end of the game. Right. So that I think that's the other side of it. And then on top of that, the 4 straight night games, I still have a hard time, because I've seen people kind of use that, 4 straight night, like I get it in college football. It's a little bit different, but at the end of the day, they call it Friday Night Lights for a reason. These kids, like their whole high school careers, or at least when they're playing varsity anyway, they're playing every Friday night at the end of a school day, and sometimes traveling 2-3 hours on a rickety old school bus to go do it. So like I have a hard time saying 4 straight night games really had that big an impact on them. Like what do you think? Because you've been through it as well, on the Friday night stuff.
I mean, you make a good point about high school, right? And now I will also say the pressure of high school is not the same as it is in college. Just to play devil's advocate with you, right?
Right.
I will say that
you don't have TV meetings and all producer
all
meetings
that
and all those
different
kind of things. Yeah.
All the extra when you're talking about big boy college football, right?
Right.
You don't really have that at the high school level.
So that would be the big, and whatever else. Yeah.
That would be the biggest difference. You know what I mean? if the game's on TV around here, it's a huge deal. And they come and talk to the kids at practice on like a Wednesday, you know what I mean? And that's it. So the pressure is obviously different. The 4 straight night game thing is an excuse though. Like that. I'm sorry. If you're playing big boy Division I college football, get over it. I'm sorry. As a coach, if I heard a player complaining or even one of my assistants complaining, I'd be like, dude, get over it. For 3 hours, you get to play the best game on the planet at a high level. I don't care what time of day it is. We'll go anywhere, anytime, any place, and we'll play this game. Like, stop it. Just stop it. That is not an excuse. I feel like it was harder for us to deal with that as opposed to the players. Like, come on, man.
We're fat old men,
3 hour
around the country
post-game show.
Yeah,
like,
that's
come on.
right.
But no, I don't like that as an excuse. I really, really don't. Now,
I don't either.
Sucks,
I mean,
but I don't like it.
I think if anything, you could say, okay, 4 straight games against ranked teams. Maybe that plays into it. But again, it's like, Duke doesn't end up being ranked at the end of the year. And Louisville went out and laid a big fat egg themselves the next week. I mean, ultimately they lost to Pittsburgh, Kentucky, Florida State without Jordan Travis, and they lost, again, bowl games. So, how big an impact, opt-outs and all that were, but they had Plummer against USC in the Holiday Bowl, and Miller Moss goes off on that defense, So I just, for whatever reason, that is the biggest head scratcher of the year to me. Like even Clemson, because Clemson was still more talented. They still should have shown up in that game. But I mean, that's the biggest question that Marcus Freeman has now is how you play better on the road. Because again, they barely beat Duke on the road. They lose to Louisville, they lose to Clemson on the road. They were 3-2 in road games by the end of the season. And the fact that they didn't show up in a couple of games, and like Sam Hartman's numbers, you look at that, the fact that they didn't show up in a couple of those games and they barely showed up, they showed up just enough in the other one, in the comeback win over Duke, because they were an eyelash away from being 2-3 in road games if they don't complete that Duke comeback.
100%. Absolutely. And some of the people in the chat are talking about, the fact that they are still in college, they have to take class, and, there's extra things that happen. They're not pros, and 4 straight night games is tough. Okay. I get it, but they're also, every one of the players on the roster is getting paid too. Not only are they getting a free education, they're also getting paid.
You've got to go to class.
Yeah.
But
a lot of these kids are taking 12 credit hours too.
And that's what I was going to say. It's like again, like high school, you're there for, like 7-8 hours a day. Whereas in college,
that's different.
It's completely different. You've got a couple hours a day. You've got practice, and the detail of practice and the playbook is different. But Fridays tend to be, a little bit of a lighter day for the college guys.
You've got time to recover.
And you're also traveling sometimes on those Fridays,
There's time built in to recover within the week. Okay. There's a reason they're not playing 3 football games a week. You get all week to recover. And I get that it wears on you. I was worn out after 4 straight night games, and I'm not even playing the game. Okay. I get it. I totally understand it. But again,
and you also get to sleep in Saturday morning, though, where, completely different than if you're playing a noon game in the Big Ten or whatever it happens to be. You get to sleep a little bit more Saturday morning.
And here's the thing. You signed up for this at Notre Dame. Okay. Like, you didn't go into this thing blind. And so you signed up to play at a high level, and you signed up to be on TV every week, and you signed up to be in prime time. So I just don't like it as an excuse. I'm sorry. I just don't. I don't.
Yeah. I mean, it's an anomaly. It's the first time in forever that they've played 4 straight night games against ranked teams and all that. But I just, I don't think any of us have sat down and looked at, like what, like how many night games in a row Alabama's had to play, and, or Georgia or whoever else in the SEC. The bottom line is, though, if you are a high profile program, you're going to play your share of primetime games.
Sure.
It's just the way it is,
So absolutely. And these nighttime games were in the first half of the season too. Like I understand that, the season wears on. It's same thing in high school. Practices get shorter. You do less hitting, and all that. We're talking the first 6 games of the season, I'm pretty sure. And so, without going back and looking at the actual schedule, but I know it was in the front half. So, body fatigue is one. That is absolutely a thing. I get it. It's a thing.
No, fatigue is real, but how does playing a night game fatigue you any more than playing a day game? Like,
yeah.
Isn't it better that you're playing 4 consecutive games at about the same time as opposed to one week at 7:30, the next week it's 2:30, and then you're back at 7:30 the next week, and then bouncing, again, like if you're in the Big Ten, you get a noon game or something like, isn't it better that you get your bodies on the same schedule for the most part 4 weeks in a row than if you're changing times each week? I would think so.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, if you're gonna,
because you're fatigued either way, because you're still playing the games,
Hey, listen, if we're really gonna talk about travel being a problem and how it's bad for the student athlete and all that, why don't you pick up the phone and call the Big Ten and ask them how the Olympic sports are going to be doing here starting next year?
That's exactly right. Well, and I mean, Cal and Stanford are going to the ACC next year, and the basketball teams and the baseball teams.
Exactly.
Not just them, but ACC as well. We're going to, the way it sounds like, men's and women's basketball, you're going to have like a 4+ hour flight to get out there to the West Coast.
Good luck.
At least every other year, if not every year. I don't know. Because I'm assuming what they'll do is stagger it. So one year you go to Stanford, one year to go to Cal, or you go to Cal. Either that or they'll make it so that, like, for example, women's basketball plays Thursday, Sunday. Maybe they make it so that, you go out and you play Cal on Thursday and Stanford on Sunday, and you just stay out there,
Which I could see that being a thing for sure.
Yeah, especially for the teams that are even farther east in the ACC, like Miami and Florida State and those teams down there, in Florida. Like those are going to be some long hauls. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we got stuck on the night game issue, which is fine.
You never know which way we're going to go.
No, I know. So again, like, I think that they most overachieved with the defense. Are there any other areas, where you think maybe they overachieved this season?
Not especially. No. I mean, we could go like position by position, maybe say some kid overachieved. Like, I would say Mitchell Evans overachieved, that kind of a deal. I think you go position by position and pick out a few guys that overachieve, that type of thing. But other than that, no, I think it kind of stays with the defense. And I think that's where they really, really overachieved.
Yeah. And, and again, like when we talk about overachieve versus even meeting expectations, I felt like the running game was what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't put that in the overachieve category, but I feel like we all expected them to have a really good running game, and they had a really good running game, and they had a really good running back. And, maybe I would say even Audric Estime, exceeded the expectations a little bit, just because I thought that the workload split might look a little bit like it did 2 years ago when he and Logan Diggs were sharing the load a little bit more. But as the season went on, it was mostly, like the reps were split a little bit more earlier on in the season. As the season went on, it was mostly Audric Estime, though.
Yeah. Yep. No, absolutely. I think you can make the case that maybe Audric overachieved a little bit. I mean, I think we all knew that he had talent. I think we all knew that, what he could potentially do, but being the absolute workhorse of that group, I think you could make a case that he overachieved. I think the run game as a whole met the expectation, but I think maybe Audric individually may have overachieved a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. When you look at where his season ended up being, I would definitely agree with that.
I think you could say, the freshman wide receivers may have given more than maybe we anticipated as a group. Yeah. When you throw in Jordan Faison and Rico Flores, and
I think you have to kind of put them in that because of the history of freshman receivers.
Absolutely. Yes. And lack thereof. Right. So I think that as a break off of the wide receivers, I think they overachieve. I think the wide receivers as a whole underachieved.
Right.
But I think the freshmen themselves overachieved.
Right. DK was saying high school kids take a bus 30 minutes to a game. Now, obviously, if you live in a metro area and there are multiple high schools in your metro area, then yeah, it's like 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever. But
Sure.
there are different
Yeah.
parts of the country, like growing up where I grew up in Kansas, because we were a bigger school. So for us to play comparable schools, like even in our league, like it was nothing, we were hour and a half to 2 hour bus rides to get, to our league competition.
It just
And
varies.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It
So
just
it
varies.
just depends on where you live, I think. What part of the country you're in. Again, like bigger cities, you're not going to have to go that far because, like Indianapolis, for example, there are high schools all over the place down there, and you don't have to go quite as far. But
absolutely,
not to get hung up on that.
No,
but
that's good.
I just think it depends on where you happen to be.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I think somebody said, like the Dakotas, you're probably you might be a 4-hour bus ride sometimes, to get to where you're going. The underachieve, like what aspect, again, it wasn't, I think where they underachieved was mostly just, like the results
from an expectation standpoint. Like, exactly. The overall wins and losses. I mean, that's where they underachieved, right? And then you could break it down to, they underachieved in a couple of in-game coaching, areas, only having 10 men on the field, throwing the ball at the end of the Ohio State game. There's plenty of places in there where you can be like, yeah, they underachieved there. But at the end of the day, the biggest underachievement is 9 regular season wins. Like that. That's by far the biggest underachievement. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt. This was not a 9-win football team. I'm sorry. And no amount of, well, I knew they were going to be 9-3 is going to convince me that this is a 9-win football team. Yes, Charlie, I understand that you are what your record says you are, right? From his famous press conference.
Right.
I get that. This was a 9-win team. This was not a 9-win football team. It just, I'm sorry, it wasn't. And the fact that they ended up being that is a huge disappointment. They underachieved.
I just want to go back to DK. I don't know how old you think I am, DK, but I was not in high school in the 70s.
That's harsh. He just aged you a decade, dude.
Seriously. I mean, come on. I've seen pictures of those guys. I don't look like those guys. Okay. I mean, we've got some different comments here, offensive line, offense, Sam Hartman, again, I don't think big picture, you can say the offense underachieved. Now you can say in those 3 specific games that the offense definitely underachieved in those games. And you can say in those specific games, especially the last 2, Louisville and Clemson, that Sam Hartman underachieved in those games because he threw in the Louisville game and the Clemson game, both losses, 3 total touchdowns, 5 interceptions, plus a couple fumbles as well. And, one was a pick 6, obviously, against Clemson. So you can say those specific games Hartman did. It's hard. To me, it's hard to evaluate his season just because of the unevenness of that. And even when you look at the total numbers, like we all thought he was going to have more than 2,600 yards and 24 touchdown passes.
100%. 100%.
So, I mean, is he an underachiever? Did he come close to meeting expectations? Like where do you put the season that he had?
Man, for Sam Hartman, he underachieved from what we anticipated he would be. I think when they first said that they were going to bring him in, I was like, really? Like I kind of gave a double take. I didn't know that he was the guy to, take them to the next level, that kind of a deal. But then, I watched film and, all that. Okay, he's got the tools. Let's see what he can do in a pro style offense, all those different things, and saying all the right things, doing all the right things. He was completely 100% bought in. And then the game started, right? And the first 4 games, it was like, this is the dude. This is the guy. Notre Dame hasn't seen quarterback play like this in a really, really long time. And then the rest of the season happened. And to be honest with you, I think Sam Hartman was underwhelming the remainder of the season. Now, he had some peaks, obviously, but in my opinion, when it came to actually playing the position of quarterback, right, there were more valleys than peaks the last 2/3 of the season, last half of the season, in my opinion. Just, the lack of going through reads, the lack of trust with some of the receivers. Now, we have since found out that there were some extenuating circumstances with the wide receiver quarterback relationship.
Yeah, and that's how
That's
much
part of it. That's part of it.
Yeah, it does at least factor in there.
Yeah, 100% it does. There's no doubt about it. It absolutely factors into it. So it allows me to kind of grade on the curve a little bit when it comes to Sam Hartman. But if we're going to compare him to my expectations, he underachieved, right? If we didn't have those expectations coming in, 9-3, okay, and he was what he was working with at wide receiver, and his best tight end, his security blanket, went down with an injury. All of these different things happened, which hurt him and his confidence level as well. You know what I mean? And so he's still underachieved for me, but I don't think it's as bad as I had originally thought. How about that?
Yeah, because of the receiver thing,
Right.
like how much difference does that make in those big moments? Like in the, when he's out there throwing 5 interceptions. I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
he was thrown to the guy that apparently, the former wide receivers coach loved, on that first interception against Louisville, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, like I said, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances there, and I have to give Sam a little bit of a pass, right? Because of that. And you just do. That's just the reality of it. I try to look at it from this point of view, Sean. 5 years from now, when I look back at the 2023 season, will I think that bringing in Sam Hartman was the right decision? I think every time I will say yes. I still think it was the right move. I still think that he added to this team. I think they benefited from his presence on the team. I do. Yeah. When you think of all the other options they could have had, Tyler Buckner would have been the starter most likely. What would that have looked like? Whatever. I still think it was the right move, and I still will look back on it in a positive manner.
Yeah, and the other side of that is, like, if depending on what kind of year Tyler Buckner would have just been coming off of, if they don't add Sam Hartman, then you also, you either are adding Riley Leonard coming into this year, or Tyler Buckner
is coming back for his final year. Yeah.
Coming into another year. How different that looks then at that point. Yeah, I agree though. I think that they're still better off, and I think the sort of, and Jesse and I touched on this a little bit yesterday, what they gained, I think, with the NIL perception and all those different, I think that factored into what we've seen in the transfer portal class this year, specific to Riley Leonard and some of these other guys as well. I think that Sam Hartman, if nothing else, really helped change the perception of what NIL looks like at Notre Dame and what you can get from NIL at Notre Dame, especially as a transfer guy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make from an off the field standpoint, right? And we are in the NIL era, and Notre Dame was not getting good publicity when it came to NIL. They just weren't. And I think top to bottom, the Sam Hartman experiment from an off the field standpoint, when you're talking about NIL and exposure. And, remember we had this discussion, Sean, when they were doing, I think it was the SEC media days, and Notre Dame was like, we're going to send some guys to New York and we're just going to do our own. Remember that? It was like, I mean, that's a power move. Okay.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame can do that. And Sam Hartman was the face of that power move.
Yeah, you had Sam Hartman, Audric Estime. I think Joe Alt was out there as well. And and they're out there, doing their little, Marcus Freeman was obviously out there. They're doing their little parade through ESPN and some other NFL Network and other media outlets and stuff like that. That's absolutely right. We don't need conference media days because we can, we generate our own interest out here in the media.
Absolutely. So, I mean, in that regard, Sean, as
the New York Mets, throwing out the first pitch and all that.
Salty says, Sam Hartman off the field was a total overachievement. I have to agree with that. I think it was. I think it expanded Notre Dame's profile from an NIL standpoint. And that's part of the reason, not all of the reason, but it's part of the reason that they had the success that they had in the transfer portal this past month, because they killed it.
I concur.
In the
Absolutely
transfer portal.
concur. Yep.
They killed it, because part of it is, look what we did with Sam Hartman. Look what we did with so-and-so. Look what Baptiste did. Look at this, look at that. Here we go. And they got most of the number one guys that they were going after. Like their hit rate was a lot better than their miss rate. There's no doubt about that.
Yep. Well, Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
Oh, first rapid fire back in the snowy north of Indiana. Let's go.
Do it. All right, here we go. Fill in the blank. We've been talking about expectations, whether or not they were met for Notre Dame last year. So your first expectation for Notre Dame next season is blank.
Simple. Make the playoff. That's the lowest expectation I can have with the positive vibes that I'm feeling going into the offseason and then into the actual season. Now, I could change my tune, I'm sure, after we watch spring ball or maybe after we watch fall practice or whatever. But I feel like I'm setting the bar kind of low, to be perfectly honest with you, with make the playoffs. I kind of wanted to say host a playoff game. I kind of wanted to go that route. But if they make the playoff, I'm good for next year. I really am. I'd be a little bit disappointed, but I do want a home playoff game. I honestly do.
Yeah, that's completely where I am as well. College football playoffs. Last year's expectation for me, anyway, was New Year's Six Bowl.
Absolutely.
That's gone now. There are no more, what we're going to call New Year's Six Bowl, because it's going to be, you're in the playoff field. It's a 12-team format, and that's essentially sucking up.
That is what the New Year's Six was, right? So
exactly.
Exactly.
So my minimal expectation, to your point, be in the playoff. Next expectation, host a first-round playoff game. Next is win that game, which would be the equivalent of winning one of those major bowl games, which they haven't done in 30 years. So that's kind of my set right there.
I completely agree with that, and I think I really, really want them to win that. If they're hosting that first-round game, there is no reason that they should lose that game. I'm sorry. There is no excuse for losing that game. None.
Upsets happen.
I get it. I understand.
I mean, there's no excuse for what happened in Arlington, over the weekend. But we beat that to death. We beat that to death yesterday, so we don't have to go down that road. It was a good, it turned out to be good that Jesse was on, so we could get it out of our system and move on.
That's a good call. Just remember, I was in Dallas yesterday.
That's right.
And there was a couple Packer fans that were sitting right behind me on the plane.
Oh boy.
Back to Midway. Just FYI. They were very nice, but they were right behind us.
Yeah,
so
I'm sure they were.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I was starting to put Sloppy Joe's comment up. He says, have a Viper. This is his expectation. Have a Viper who has the ability to put pressure on the quarterback. So fill in the blank, Vince. Jordan Botelho's 2023 season was blank.
A massive disappointment. It was a massive disappointment. Now, I didn't have huge expectations for him in the first place. I'll be honest with you. He hasn't proven to me to be the guy that Notre Dame thinks he is at this point.
And that's the thing. Yeah.
I've just heard too many stories that give me pause. How about that? And he has yet to make me forget about those stories. So from a Notre Dame perspective, it was a huge disappointment was 2023. I don't want to say it's what I anticipated, because I didn't anticipate it was going to be this bad. So it was still a disappointment for me as well.
Yeah, I think it was solid, yet not spectacular. Like, you didn't see Jordan Botelho make, like a bunch of bonehead plays, and you're like, what the heck is Jordan Botelho doing out there? We've had the conversation with some other guys, but he did ultimately underachieve based on the expectations that pretty much everyone, including himself, had for him coming into this year. And I think of everyone on the defense, Botelho would be kind of at the bottom of the ladder in terms of who did and who didn't meet or exceed their expectations for the season. And that includes Maris Leofau, because even though Leofau didn't play, to the top level of maybe, what everyone would have wanted for him this year, I do still think he was better than, the 2022 version of Maris Leofau. And,
It's true.
look at where he ended up, like
Craziness.
still, yeah. I mean, still could have been better, like with run diagnosis and run fits and all that kind of stuff, but did it, at least exceed basic expectations in some other areas. But like you look at Bello, he had four sacks, 3 hurries this year. He did better than that as a backup to Isaiah Foskey the year before, So I think the expectations, have been on Bello for a long time, and that's ultimately, this year what Al Washington and Al Golden have got to be able to get out of him, bring out of him.
Yes.
This year, you've got to. There's a whole nother level. I think we all know it for Bello to go to, and that's what they've all got to figure out.
If he can reach the potential that Notre Dame thinks that he has, that will be a huge shot in the arm for this defense. It just will be. It'll be one of the things that we'll be talking about this time next year. It was like, wow, right. Bello just came out of nowhere, frankly. And he gave us a taste of it, obviously, in the bowl game, but it needs to stretch over 14 games.
It is like Isaiah Foskey got there ultimately a little bit sooner, but like Foskey was a little bit of the same boat. We were waiting for a little bit longer than we thought we were going to before he finally got there. But once he did, I mean, we saw what he could be.
Sure.
So, all right, Vince, there is talk that Nick Saban is heading to College Game Day next season. Scale of 1 to 10, how much does that move the needle for you?
Maybe a 2. I guess because how do I say this? He doesn't have much of a personality. At least not that I've seen, right? Like, I feel like they have sufficiently replaced Corso with McAfee. Like, I feel, he's like the new Corso, okay? Mm-hmm. Just a younger version, outspoken, has some crazy takes, whatever, right? I just don't think Nick Saban has the personality needed. Like, at least Urban Meyer has a personality. And like on the Fox game pregame show, right? Like Nick Saban, unless there's something that I'm missing.
Like, did you expect Urban Meyer to have a personality before that? Like his
yes, more so than
this
Saban.
whole show's been about expectations. Like, has he exceeded your expectations along those lines? To me, I think he has a little bit.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, you've seen videos of him in the club and stuff like that. He's obviously got the personality.
Well,
I mean,
again, like.
Just saying. So I mean, he's kind of met my expectations on that show. If Nick Saban has an ounce of personality, he will surpass my expectations.
I mean, you see it, I think, every once in a while, like when you see clips when they'll post, like social media from his coach's show or like a press conference where he kind of lights up, a little, like he goes off on some tangent on whatever it happens to be. Personally, I think that someone of his stature is kind of what Game Day has been lacking, as Corso has gotten old. Corso, I think, is like 88 or something like that right now. And from what I heard, it sounds like he's still going to be around, but he's probably just going to do like the last segment, where he puts on the, the mascot head or whatever. But, Saban, McAfee is his own deal, whatever you think about Pat McAfee. And, it is interesting that Saban was a weekly regular guest on the McAfee show this year.
I didn't realize that.
I'm sure they were paying him quite a bit of money to do that appearance. But those two guys, as a result, they've kind of got a little relationship. So I think there's going to be some chemistry there. And he obviously knows all the other guys. I feel like Game Day has been lacking that, that kind of figure with some gravitas and
sure,
like the answer to Urban Meyer, basically. Yeah. So
I can see that.
I'm guessing that, he's a little bit like Belichick, where like Belichick was playing a game for a long time at his press conferences in terms of, I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to be dry and vanilla and I'm not going to give you anything. And I'm sure Saban was a little bit the same way. So just how much of that we get, I don't know, but I do feel like Game Day needed that kind of presence. And I mean, you can't go wrong with the guy who is the greatest college football coach of all time, arguably. So.
Even SEC Shorts did like a serious thing with him at the end of their most recent little clip that they put out, when they were giving grades to all the SEC teams. They like took his hat and like hung it in the corner and like turned the lights off, like, but if I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna get some flack, and I don't care. If game day wants to move the needle, they need to retire Lee Corso.
Oh man,
they need it's getting to the point where it's almost like Weekend at Bernie's. Like it's time to just hang it up, and it's okay. It's okay that it's time. It's okay. Right. I'm sorry. It's okay.
And I think that that's why, if they go the direction that I was just talking about, where they just kind of, bring him in to have some fun, put on the headgear, like the mascot head at the end of the show. I think that that's kind of like, it's obviously pointing toward it's coming. His time on that show is getting closer to an end. But yeah, I think that, especially when you're adding a guy like Sabin, who is going to be part of the regular panel, I think, there's only so much room, because those shows, there's only you only get so much time to kind of say your point on each topic anyway. It's not like a podcast where we can sit here and expand as much as we want, whatever else, because you've got 5-6 guys out there, and I don't think it makes sense to kind of keep Corso and pull it, yank my cords out. I don't think it makes sense to kind of keep Corso in that mix, especially if you are adding another guy out there.
I mean, I still love the head thing and all of that, like the mascot. Like it's a great shtick. I get it. It's just, you see some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it's just like, man, they just need to let this guy just sit in front of his TV and watch some games. Like, just let the man go.
Yeah. I agree with DK though. I think Corso takes you in a bare knuckles fight when it's all said and done.
Does he get to wear one of those massive mascot heads so I can't get to him?
It'd be like Bob Barker on Happy Gilmore.
The price is wrong.
What do you think now?
That's wrong.
That's right. Fill in the blank, Vince. After Caleb Williams said that he wouldn't declare for the NFL draft until he was assured the Bears wouldn't pick him at number 1 overall, Williams has in fact declared for the draft. He did it yesterday, which was the last day to do it.
I
saved this for you, by the way. I could have brought this up yesterday
with
Jesse, but you're the Bears fan, so I saved it for you.
Yeah, listen. It just allows me to hate him forever, which is the best part of the whole situation.
Please, Bears, draft him, please.
I don't like this man, and I have been told by people that he's a good kid and he's all these. I don't like him. I don't like him at all. Like, not even a little bit. I don't like him. And somebody said if they trade Justin Fields to like the Falcons or something, or I forget who they said, but like they would have 3 top 10 draft picks and all of this stuff. And it's like, you get way more draft capital if you get out of that number 1 slot. I hate to say it, you really would. And the Bears are not one position away from being a Super Bowl team. Okay. They've got holes across the roster. They need to build up the entire roster. They can win with Justin Fields. I do believe that they can win with him. I think he got marketably better from year 2 to year 3. How about he gets an offensive coordinator for more than 1 year at a time? Like, that would be nice. Like, maybe set him up for some success. But as far as Caleb Williams is concerned, the fact that he's dictating who drafts him and all of these different things, like, we haven't seen this since Eli, right? Like, that's the last time that this kind of all went down.
I was going to say, he's not the first guy to do this.
I know he's not.
It's not like Eli Manning and Elway are the two.
Yeah, those are the two
most
big
prominent guys. And it worked out for both of them.
Those two ended up being in the Hall of Fame too.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I am not a fan. I hope whatever team drafts him is a friggin' dumpster fire team, and then he ends up right in the middle of the flames. That's what I hope.
I think it's just going to make this whole draft season that much more juicy. The fact that you've got this and what kind of leverage it potentially gives the Bears to trade that pick. You got the Patriots sitting there. You got Washington sitting there. All these teams sitting behind them. Like, would Carolina jump in and decide that they want to go after a quarterback for a second straight year after, trading the Bears this pick to begin
Right.
with. It's
Exactly.
that's that's why the Bears are in the position that they're in right now, is because Carolina wanted to trade up and take Bryce Young.
They've got 2 top 10 picks now.
Teams will do crazy, stupid things to get their quarterback. And that someone's going to be willing to make that deal. I think the Bears are ultimately going to trade out of that spot because, they've got another pick there in the top 10. How much, you just keep making this move. Like you trade and then you get another high first round pick next year out of the deal from somebody else, because like you said, there's a lot of roster building that has to be done. But the other side of that is you got to make good picks,
Absolutely, 100%.
Got to make good picks with it. And that's 100%. Where Ryan Poles, I think, is really going to be tested.
There's only one guy in college football that I want on the Bears roster, and he wore number 76 for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
They could get him. I think they've got a chance to get him.
I think they do too.
At number 9 already. Yeah,
I think they do too. I really do. That would make me the draft would be a success for me if they bring in Joe Alt at left tackle. I mean, that would be, because that's one of the places that they need absolute help is on the offensive line.
They've got to get at least one stud receiver and one stud offensive lineman out of those 2 picks. And
they could.
And I think that there's a chance, and they might even be able to get another wide receiver out of this deal. Because I've heard, all these different scenarios, you trade down and you trade down again. And, I think that there's a possibility that they could get a lot of. Yeah.
Depending on who wants that number 1 pick, right? They could end up in the middle of the top 10, right? Like 5 or 6, something like that, whatever the draft order is. And you could get a top flight wide receiver and Joe Alt, man. That would be, let's go. I would be excited about that.
Yep. DT, man, he's rubbing it right in. Caleb Williams in Chicago feels right.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Isn't Detroit Hunter a Chicago guy? How can you say that feels right? Come on, man. He is a West Coast guy. So I want him to end up in Washington. I think that would be, he has no prayer of being successful in Washington. Send him to the Commanders or the team. Or
honestly, he feels like a Raider to me.
Oh, that's a good call.
They would have to do a lot of wheeling and dealing. I think. I don't know that they're willing to trade up that high.
TK says the Bears draft McCarthy in the first round.
That would be.
Oh,
that would be awesome.
Would be bad. Actually. That would not be. Wherever Jim Harbaugh ends up is who's going to take McCarthy. And if anybody thinks Jim Harbaugh is coming back to Michigan, JJ McCarthy declared for the draft. If Jim Harbaugh was coming back to Michigan, so would JJ McCarthy. Jim is gone.
I think he's, especially after winning that championship, I think the NFL is going to come hard after him this time. And there are a lot more teams with openings. He's already interviewed with the Chargers. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because I've been reading some stuff about, he's still negotiating, with Michigan and that kind of stuff. And one of the things that he wants in the contract is a guarantee that he won't be fired if the NCAA drops the hammer,
which is hilarious.
I know.
Mean, how can tell me you're guilty without telling me you're guilty? What?
Yeah.
Gosh. It's hilarious to me.
All right, so speaking of NFL head coaches, Nick Sirianni has led the Eagles to 3 straight playoff appearances in his first 3 years, including last year's Super Bowl. Yet there are calls for his job after going from potentially being the number 1 seed. They were in position to be the number 1 seed in the NFC in early January. They plummeted all the way to a wild card loss on the road to Tampa Bay last night. Do you buy or sell the Eagles moving on from Sirianni, Vince?
Is this not, can we not just have this conversation and just replace Sirianni with Ryan Day? I feel like it's a very similar conversation, to be honest with you. Sustained success, and yet the fan base probably wants him out.
Yeah.
And the answer to me, from looking at it from a 30,000 foot view, is no. You don't get rid of somebody that's having that kind of success. You don't. And if you do, who are you getting? Who is going
Well,
to do a better job?
Belichick is on the market. There's
Everybody,
already
I get,
Belichick is on the market. Harbaugh is on the market. It's
yeah,
not like Mike Vrabel is on the market. You literally, like who's
yeah.
available.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a who's who. Pete Carroll is on the market. There's a who's who of coaches who they could potentially go out and get right now.
This is true. Now, I think 3 of them all have their AARP card, so I don't know how sustainable that would be.
Yeah.
But your point is well taken. Your point is well taken. There are options out there, but no, I would not get rid of either one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good analogy. Sirianni today and expectations and everything. I think the difference is Ryan Day, didn't just crumble down like for an entire month and a
Right.
half like
Yeah,
Sirianni
this is true.
did. I mean, they were 14-3 and in the Super Bowl last year. They started off 11-1 and lost 5 of their last 6 regular season games and then lose a playoff game to boot. So they went from 10-1 to 11-7 by the time it was all said and done, which is
Terrible.
just
It's terrible.
crazy. And there's he lost both of his coordinators, one of them being Steichen, who got Indianapolis to within a game of being in the playoffs this year. And the other one, Jonathan Gannon, goes out to Arizona. It just sounds like there's a lot of crazy inner turmoil that goes beyond, playoff appearances and all that kind of, like just how, has he lost the locker room type stuff? Because the guy is I've never been a fan of just his antics and his, there's a lot of external cockiness that you generally don't see from a head coach, maybe unless it's Ryan Day. I don't know. Again, it's it is a good analogy to compare them. But how much difference did those coordinators make? Because
Sure.
if you're the head coach, what did you fix over the course of the season once things started breaking down? And there was a lot of things that ended up breaking down for him as the season went on. So it's all dysfunctional talk right now. I want whatever is bad for the Eagles. So if he's the problem, keep him, Philly. I'm perfectly fine if he's the problem. If he's not, whatever, move on, whatever you have to do. Never completely cared for him. But you're right. It's like when you just look at 3 straight playoffs, you were, in a Super Bowl, when I started hearing this stuff, they might move on, it's crazy. But then you start hearing all this other stuff that comes with it. And I don't know, it was crazy last night. I don't know. I guess you were, I don't know how much you were able to kind of see from where you were, but there was receivers and tight ends yelling at Jalen Hurts and just all this crazy stuff going on. So
they're losing.
It's just nuts how quickly it's falling apart out there.
It sounds like the Eagles are also going to be losing a bunch of veterans potentially too to retirement.
Sounds like Jason Kelce is going to retire.
He's retiring. And they went down the list of guys that have kind of been there for a really long time and might be, leaving. And that could, that could make a difference too, because those veterans are what kind of set the tone in the locker room. And if you lose those guys, then what's that going to look like, et cetera. So those are all things that ownership obviously has to take into account. Do you want to start from scratch? You want to start completely over? That's going to be tough to do.
Yeah. I think Michael Hahn agrees with my philosophy. Whatever's bad for the Eagles, he's a Giants fan, he'll take. Apparently Kelce told the team he's going to retire. Hasn't announced it officially, but it's looking because he was on the fence, I think, after last year. Yeah.
There's a really good documentary on Jason Kelce. I think it's on Amazon.
I haven't seen that yet, but
it's good.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it. Yeah. I thought it was going to be on both brothers, but it's just on him.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And because it was before the whole Taylor Swift thing. You know what I mean? So it pretty much covers all of last season, and it kind of takes you on the ride of his wife being pregnant and the whole thing. Long story short, I thought it was a nice peek into his life, and I thought it was really good. He really struggled with the decision to retire or not in last year's offseason, and he didn't even let the team know until the day before free agency started.
Oh, wow.
So I think this time around, he kind of knew that if he came back, it was going to be for a year. Like he's,
that's someone who, I mean, they already have their own podcast and all that stuff, but that's someone,
yeah.
I think with his personally, I think he would be better than Gronk on TV.
I think it'd be fantastic. I think it'd be fantastic. And he has enough off the field, not cliche, whatever the word I'm looking for there, cachet, not cliche, cachet. He's got enough off the field because he's got.
Don't start throwing archetypes around like Tony Romo was doing in the early
that was
game
terrible.
yesterday.
That was awful, by the way. Like he got that completely wrong.
I know.
Anyway, he's got he sang on that Christmas album. He's got the podcast. Like he's got off the field stuff that he can do, and it was hilarious. There's one part, Sean, and you'll appreciate this. He does the podcast from his house, and there is a point where he's doing the podcast, and his wife is trying to keep the kids quiet, so that they can't hear them on the podcast. He's like, Daddy's working. You got to be quiet. I could just see my wife doing the same thing, with my kids.
All your kids running around outside, total chaos outside that door where the green walls are. Yeah.
Yes. It was hilarious to me. I was like, I know how that goes. So yeah, it was, I think when he made that decision, it was for 1 year. You know what I mean? And, regardless of the way things ended this year, I think he was going to be done.
Yeah. So the USFL and the XFL have merged into a league that's going to be called the United Football League, or the UFL. So there's no more USFL. There's no more XFL. They're going to be actually divisions in the UFL.
They took 4 teams from one, 4 teams from the other. And those are the divisions. Yeah,
exactly. So my question is, should they have just kept the name from one of these 2 existing leagues rather than created a completely different name for this league?
I love the collaboration, to be honest with you, because I think it's a 50-50 venture from what I can gather. And if it's a 50-50 venture, if you name it one or the other, then it looks like the other one is in control. And I think they wanted to avoid that.
And I think you're probably right. And it just seems like, like a little bit of confusion for, because there are so many casual fans of this league to begin with, because it's, a spring league and people know USFL, people know XFL.
Right.
And so now you've got UFL, and it's like,
it's not competing against anything though. So I don't think it matters.
That's
true.
What
I mean?
And they did at least keep the names, there's a USFL division and an XFL division.
So I kind of dig that, actually. I mean, it's a true marriage. Like they both looked at each other and they looked at their models and they're like, okay, this can probably work, but probably not by ourselves. So if we join forces with the TV contracts and with, some of the more successful teams and things within each of their leagues, and we join forces, I think it can be sustainable. And look, no spring league is going to be sustainable super long term unless the NFL gets involved.
Right.
I just don't think that that's going to be the case. So, but they've got to make a name for themselves, and this is the new iteration. And if they can keep it going for a few years, I think the NFL does get involved, and I think they see the value of kind of a minor league for the NFL. I do.
Yeah, and I mean, you've already seen, like look at Brandon Aubrey as an example. He came out of the the USFL. That's where he got his start. And because as we know, he was a soccer player.
Yes, he was. Not a kicker, by the way.
He turned himself into a professional kicker in the USFL, and there are other guys who have come out of those leagues as well who have made it to the NFL. And so I completely agree. I think that is where this league is really going to, sort of make its foundation, is if they can become a consistent developmental league, more partnership, I think, with the NFL.
Yeah.
I was looking, there were some people tweeting about the archetype comment that Romo made.
He made it sound like it was like a career arc. I think that's what he wanted to say.
Yeah, he said that he said something about the archetype of Mason Rudolph's career.
Yeah, it should have been like career arc, not archetype.
Not archetype.
Completely wrong usage of that word.
Yes.
And he said it twice in the same rant.
Right.
which it's just
He
made it
doubled
sound-
down on his
Yes, he
wrongness
did.
of the use of the word.
Yes, he did. 100%. 100%. So, yeah.
Get out your thesaurus, Tony Romo. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. So,
You want a fun fact?
yes.
So, as you know, we talked about at the top of the show that I was in Florida for my son's kicking extravaganza.
Yes,
Whatever.
and I meant to ask you more about that.
Went very well. It went very well. And like I said, this was a national thing. So they had like their national coaches there working with the kids and whatnot. And guess who my son got to work with one-on-one and do some film breakdown and get out on the field and do the whole thing? Somebody we all know.
I know the answer to this. A little birdie came by and told me.
Oh, really?
Day. So, yes.
What little bird?
Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah.
It was your father-in-law at the basketball game.
Oh, did you guys talk? Okay.
Yeah, I got the report. I got the
Nice.
report of who he was working with, and it sounded like things went better for him from a punting standpoint.
They did.
than expected.
They did, yeah. So obviously we didn't say the name. It was Justin Yoon, works for Cole's Kicking, and Justin got it. He got to work with my son, and he really enjoyed it. And like I think Dylan was a little starstruck, which was pretty fun to watch. That doesn't usually happen. And it was cool. It was really, really neat. So for the 2 days, he got to work with Justin Yoon, of all the people that were there to help him and everything. And so it was a really good weekend. It was a lot of fun.
Cool.
And
very cool.
Yeah, it was good. It was a
so
great.
What happens next now? Like, do you know the rankings and all that kind of stuff? What's the next step in this process?
They will take the tape, because everything they did was recorded, like drills, charting, like all this stuff was recorded. So he'll be ranked nationally as a kicker. He's already ranked as a kicker. He's 84th in the country in his class. Okay. And then he has not been ranked as a punter, but he went and he did all the things to get ranked at this camp for punting. He made it to the punt finals that was there, which was awesome. He had a boomer of a punt. It was great. Awesome. And so he'll get a ranking for punting. So he'll be ranked in both. And hopefully the number goes up from 84 for kicking. And hopefully the punt number is a good one as well. But he's a 4.5 star. They only go up to 5, which is awesome. And so now we get to take this little ranking out. There'll be a week or two probably before they update everything. But now we get to take this out. We're going to hit some junior days, and he's made some contact with some coaches. And
very cool.
That's the next step. So
now he is a junior, right?
He is. Yeah, he's a junior right now. Okay. So, and everything, like, you know how we talk recruiting all the time, right? The 25s are getting all the publicity, for every other position. But for kickers, unless you're like the top 5 kicker in the country,
this is kind of where it really gets started for most of these guys.
Like the vast majority of these guys, they could get some offers in the summer. Some of the upper guys. So like if you're ranked as a 4.5 or whatever, you could potentially get an offer in the summer, but a lot of them are going to come during your senior season or just after, like right before signing day and everything. That's kind of where it really kind of hits hard. So the next 12 months or so, 10 months or so should be very, very interesting. Should be fun.
All right.
Should be fun.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Good luck. We're going to have Dylan on it at some point.
I know. I'm thinking, signing day. Well, he can put the hats out front, we'll
that's
do
right.
The whole thing. So
that's right. Very cool.
Hoping for a 5-star ranking when it's all said and done. That's our goal. So
all right.
Like it's me. It's his
Finger
goal.
crossed.
Yeah, I just drive him places.
Let's be honest. It's Dad's goal too, but
yeah, it is. It is.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm glad it went well, and hopefully
it was awesome.
Keeps going even better later on down the road. Very
cool.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for being here tonight. Hit that like button if you would. And of course, our friendly reminder to subscribe, rate, rend, review, and all that kind of good stuff on your podcast platform. And we will talk to you next time on IB Nation Sports Talk.